Ranking Resident Evil. Again.
What's up, guys? Deja vu, right? Yes, I am doing another ranking of the Resident Evil games. This is the first and maybe only time, we'll see, that I'm going to revisit a ranking so soon. Now, I did a ranking, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, where I ranked all of what I considered the mainline Resident Evil games, Resident Evil the original, all the way to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Did not include Resident Evil 0 or Code Veronica because, honestly, I had never played them before, and I did not realize that they were actually part of the mainline storyline. They were actually canonical with that story. I thought that they were kind of offshoots like Resident Evil Revelations and Umbrella Corps and all those other games that I've never played before. And my God, the Resident Evil fan community, let me know how wrong I was in the comments section. And you know what? I can own up to whenever I am wrong, so I said, you know what? Let me look on PlayStation and see if I can play these. And nonetheless, they had Resident Evil 0 and a port of Code Veronica on the PlayStation Store, so I bought both of them, and I've been playing the shit out of Resident Evil games for the past 2 weeks. Those were the first two that I did after that ranking, and I have beaten both of those games and will now include them in my rankings. So now, I am ranking officially all of the Resident Evil mainline games. So Resident Evil 0 all the way to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, including Code Veronica, will all be in this ranking. No Revelations, no Revelations 2, no Umbrella Corps, no Raccoon City, none of that other stuff, none of the offshoots, just the mainline story games. But before I get into my new updated ranking, guys, please like and share this video, hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this channel and want to see more, and if you enjoyed it so much that you want to help contribute to this channel and help it grow, check down below in the video description for my Patreon page. That is the best way to help this channel grow and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. But let's get down to the nitty gritty. Number 9, the bottom of my ranking of all of these games, is Resident Evil 0. Now, I am as surprised as you that something as actually I enjoyed less than Resident Evil 6. Now, let me say, there's not a single game on this list that I think is terrible. Even Resident Evil 6, as much as I put it at the bottom in the last one, and I said it's the only games on that previous ranking that I've never really had the desire to revisit, it still has merit. It still has some fun stuff about it, but I'll get into that. But even with Resident Evil 0, now being at the bottom of my ranking, this was still a pretty decent game. This was not a game that I hated playing. For the most part, I enjoyed playing it. There was just some things about it that really, really held it back for me. And I will get into all of those right now. We'll just start with the negatives. So Resident Evil 0's story was the big thing that held it back for me. This is the prelude to the Spencer Mansion thing. This is about how all this came to be. How did these zombies get let loose in the mansion and on the Arklay Mountains and all that kind of stuff. How all of these Resident Evil crazy ass events started was with this. Well, fuck this origin, because this origin sucks. You have this Dr. Spencer, who is like the big, guy that started all of this shit, and he got screwed over by Umbrella. You've got Albert Wesker and William Birkin working together, which changes William Birkin from a very sympathetic, tragic character in Resident Evil 2 to a complete prick that deserves everything that he got, which I do not like. Albert Wesker, even him being here, they don't really do a whole lot with him except throw his sunshades on him and you get a couple of Wesker lines, but nonetheless, you have this Spencer guy who has like this leech power where he throws these little leeches everywhere, and that's, I guess, the precursor virus to the T virus, and you go through this whole fucking thing where you're going through this mansion, which isn't the Spencer Mansion, it's like a training facility, but it feels like a mansion, and then you go into the sewers and the lab, it's like the same thing over and over again, and you just find out that, oh, this dude who's been throwing leeches at you the whole time that looks like a reject from a fucking 80s glam band is actually the old man Spencer, who's just kind of been showing himself as a young guy, and then you fight him in this weird Leech Queen thing, and it's a game that never really felt like it had much forward momentum. It was still fun. It has a lot of the vibe of that Resident Evil remake, so I enjoyed it for that. I still like the kind of old school exploration. I can get behind the take controls to a degree if it's done well. So I enjoyed playing it and doing the puzzles and the exploration and everything like that, but the story brought it way the fuck down. Not only that, I'm kind of mixed on the whole way that they had this with the item management to where now you have two characters that you can control. You just morph from one to the other, and that's how you control manage your items, to where you have like 6 slots, and if you want to pick up 8 things, you just give 2 to the other guy that you're not really controlling, and you can swap back and forth and give each other items. And I liked using each other to kind of solve puzzles, but it was frustrating as shit going through this game and only be able to hold 6 things, or I have to morph to the other person and get things with them, but then they don't have aggravation. So Resident Evil 0, decent enough, but to me, I would play Resident Evil 6 again before I would play this again. Number 8 is Resident Evil 6. I still think that it is at the bottom of these lists as far as video games. It is certainly a very disappointing entry in this franchise that kind of put Resident Evil on a hiatus for a while, because they had Resident Evil 4 that was this monster success. They had Resident Evil 5, which was more financially successful, but not as critically or as fan reception-wise as successful. And then they went even further with Resident Evil 6 and just went balls to the wall with insane blockbuster action stuff that just didn't quite work, but it's still a fun enough game in spots. Leon's campaign is still kind of Resident Evil 4-ish. I don't hate Chris's campaign or Jake's campaign. I think that the story is pretty lame in this one. I hate the fact that you have 4 different campaigns before you kind of get the whole idea, and by the time you've gone through your 4th run through of this with Ada, you're like, fucking Christ, I am bored as shit playing this game, and the answers that you get aren't really satisfying or merit 4 different campaigns. So decent enough game, not really any changes. I haven't replayed it since then. I don't imagine my thoughts would change very much, so it's okay, but it's just not nearly as good as the ones above it. Number 7 is Resident Evil Code Veronica. Now, let me say this right away. I hear all of you that say that this game deserves a remake above Resident Evil 4, because after playing it, I actually agree with you. They should remake this game now, because this does feel like a true sequel to Resident Evil 2. It feels like it does expand the story and expand the lore in ways where there is a lot of great story and great character moments here, especially between Chris and Wesker, that they need to bring this back in an updated fashion. Because honestly, the dated gameplay is the only reason why it is this low. The story was great. As far as the old school, like pre-HD remake tank controls, old school Resident Evil games, this one is certainly the most advanced. The setting is really cool, kind of landing on this island where you have this prison, and then you have this creepy ass mansion, and then there's an underwater sub place with a fucking airport. There's a lot of variety in the environments. The whole story with Alexia and whatever was it, Alexander, whatever the 2 twins were, that was kind of creepy and icky in its own weird way. Like, there was a lot of really interesting things going on in this game as far as story-wise that kept me playing. The gameplay got frustrating after a while. The old school item management and the tank controls got frustrating after a while, especially healing. My God, people talk about low ammo in these early Resident Evil games. I had ammo fucking galore, but green herbs, nah. I would go 2 hours sometimes, like limping along, where if somebody just sneezed on me, I'd die before I'd find a green herb. I restarted and rage quit and swore and fucking cursed my TV out so many times on certain segments where I would have to go through a room with a couple of hunters, or God forbid a bandersnatch where one hit would kill me, and I would just have to kind of strategize to be like, oh, I need to weave this way. So the dated gameplay is honestly the only reason why it's this low. If I had played it back on the GameCube or the Dreamcast whenever it first came out, and I grew up with this game, I could imagine it being much higher. I understand why it has such a cult following. The story, characters, all that stuff, awesome. It needs a remake. I'm totally with you. Dated gameplay brings it down here, because I probably will never play it again. Number 6 is Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5 does have its problems. There are some things about it that certainly is not as good as Resident Evil 4, and I'm a fan of that kind of action gameplay. I'm not really a fan of Shiva as a character. I think that they could have very easily had another Resident Evil like Claire Redfield would have been perfect in this game, in my opinion. I loved the co-op gameplay. I have a lot of fond memories of playing this with my brother and going through this entire storyline with a friend. I mean, it makes this game so much more fun if you play with that old school couch co-op that is kind of done and forgotten with in today's era of video games. And I like the whole storyline. I like kind of wrapping everything up with Wesker and bringing Jill back as kind of like a henchman to Wesker. Wesker was really cool. It gets silly in some spots, like, you know, the whole Chris punching a boulder thing. He's kind of like hulked out at this point. It's very, very over the top. But I still have a lot of fun with this game. I've replayed it a little bit. I haven't replayed it as much as some of the other ones, but I still have fun with it and have a lot of fond memories with the co-op, so it's going to sit comfortably right here at number 6. Number 5 is Resident Evil 3. Now, I will say, while this has not changed placement in my ranking as far as which games I have it above and below, I do think that the remake is a little bit better than I gave it credit for in my initial review. I've replayed it a couple of times since then. I just did an S rank a couple of days ago in like an hour and 45 minutes, so it is still a short game, but a lot of them are short once you beat them. But I do think that while I don't think Nemesis is as well utilized as he should have been, especially with how well it utilized Mr. X, and I'm mostly talking about the remake here. I only played the original one time. It was cool, not a whole lot of memories with it. But the remake could have used Nemesis better. I really don't care for Nemesis at all after he morphs into like that amphibian dog thing. I think everything after that, Nemesis is kind of like whatever for me. Everything before where he's actually Nemesis and is chasing you on foot and has weapons, that shit's badass. But I do think that the game has a lot of fun replayability about it. Yes, it's not necessarily, when I say that the game is short, it's not so much that I think that the runtime of the game is short, it's just that there's not any alternate, there's no alternate content to have. Every single one of these games for the most part has extra modes like Fourth Survivor or Assignment Ada or even like Not a Hero in Resident Evil 7, or you get Resident Evil 2 where you have 2 different campaigns plus 2 B-side campaigns. So there's just not enough alternate content to this. It's literally one campaign and that's all you get. It never changes. Even if you up the difficulty, things don't swap up. There's not like different items in different rooms. It's just the same thing over and over and over again, and you just unlock more weapons. And I'm not a fan at all of the Resident Evil resistance thing. I don't care about that. I think most Resident Evil fans don't. So if you use that as an excuse as, well, you got this other game with it, that's why it's 60 bucks. Yeah, that's another game that I'm never gonna play. So I do think that it's better than I gave it credit for as far as how much fun that I had with it, because I've had more fun with it replaying it and doing speed runs. But I do think that the criticism holds that there's not enough content here for $60. So that's kind of what brings it down to where it is. Number 4 is Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. And I actually just finished playing this game over this morning, or actually it was last night that I beat it. This is a game that I played through entirely in VR the first 2 times that I played it, and my God, what an experience that was.
Oh, fuck. Fuck me! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, hell! Oh, shit. Oh, fuck.
Oh, shit. Oh! Cody, how's it run? Oh, shit! He got me. Oh, damn. Oh! Oh, damn! It's not so bad as you close your eyes.
Chill out, dude. There's nothing that's gonna jump out.
Just naturally, I'm shaking, okay?
Yeah, you're shaking like crazy.
Oh, what? Yo. Oh! What do you want? Ah! Oh, get away from me, fam.
It's by far the scariest game that I've ever played in VR. It's terrifying. Your hair stand up on the back of your neck. You'll hear breathing. You'll hear things and you're like, my God, I know I have to go through that door, but I do not want to go. And I've played it since on just the regular old first person play with no VR, and I think that the game is still damn good and a lot of fun. Some people really don't like the first person thing. I actually think they pulled it off very well. I like the old school approach to puzzle solving and, you know, backtracking to get keys. They bring back those kind of classic elements. This was after Resident Evil 6 and everybody was like, fuck, Resident Evil's dead. Resident Evil 7 brought back a lot of what we love about Resident Evil and just kind of did something different with it. New story, new characters, new direction. I think that the Bakers are terrifying, and even when you get to Lucas, he's not necessarily scary, he's more goofy, but his section is kind of fun with these traps and these puzzles that he has. And I think that the whole story with Ethan and Mia and Evelyn is actually pretty unique, and I'm very curious if they do a Resident Evil 8. The rumor is they're going to continue with these characters. I'm very curious at how they're going to expand them into the further Resident Evil lore. So I actually think this game is pretty damn good. The only negatives that I have with it is that the molded kind of get a little bit repetitive as a villain. You only have like 3 character models, one crawls, one standing up, and one standing up with like a sword arm. So they get a little repetitive as an enemy after a while. But other than that, I think the game has a ton to offer and is one of the scariest experiences that I've ever had. So it is sitting here at number, what did I say, 4? Number 3 is going to be Resident Evil. Now, like I've said in previous videos, I did not grow up with Resident Evil. I never got a chance to play the original one on PlayStation. My first introduction to the first Resident Evil game was on the GameCube remake after Resident Evil 4 made me a fanatic, and I went out and bought everything that I could find, and this was luckily already available for me to play. The remake to Resident Evil is phenomenal. It is a fantastic upgraded remake. I think the story is great. I love that the updated version of the old school fixed camera tank controls works very well. The storyline, the crimson heads and all the different enemies that you encounter in this, like the snake and the spiders and everything, those are just awesome, iconic moments. And I think that all the way through to the end of the game, as far as settings, the Spencer Mansion and all the places that you go is probably the most iconic setting in these Resident Evil games. And even though I did not play the original, Resident Evil, for all intents and purposes, did create the entire survivor horror genre in video games for the most part. So you got to give it its due for that. I love this game. If they ever do a full remake again, like they've done with the engine with Resident Evil 2 and 3, shit. First day buy for me. Now, while I said this in my previous ranking, I think that this top 2 here is one of the most difficult choices on top 2s that I've ever had in a ranking, and it is even harder this time because since I did that ranking a couple weeks ago, I have replayed Resident Evil 2 a couple of times, and I've played different pieces of Resident Evil 4. I didn't want to go through the whole game. It's a pretty long Resident Evil game. But I've revisited both of those games again since that ranking. And damn, if I did not come this close to changing what my number 1 and number 2 was, because these two are so damn good at very different things. But I'm gonna hold true to it for reasons that I'll explain when I get to my number 1. So number 2 for me is still Resident Evil 2. Now, I did play the GameCube port of this. I actually played Resident Evil 2, the GameCube version, 2 or 3 times versus only like once on Nemesis. So I like that one better, even the old school one. But you get to Resident Evil 2, the remake, and as far as like survivor horror, that is the quintessential Resident Evil game for me. As far as the horror-centric ones where you have to have scarce ammo and do item management and backtrack, that is it. That is the pinnacle of Resident Evil for me. I think it's a fantastic game. If I could review it again, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 5 because the few things that I had gripes with when I first reviewed it, I no longer have. Mr. X is iconic as hell and awesome. The settings with this police station and the sewers and the laboratory is just iconic as shit. I love the whole police section of this game. Once I get past the police station, I actually miss it. And Claire is a great character. Leon's a great character. I love both of them. They're different campaigns where you have very different encounters about 2/3 of the way through the game. And it's just, there's very little if nothing negative I could say about this game. I love replaying this damn thing. Like I get bored and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, let me speed run through Resident Evil 2 and kill 2 hours real quick. It is awesome. But number 1 for me is still Resident Evil 4. Now, while I did come this close to giving Resident Evil 2 the leg up on it because I think that the remake of Resident Evil 2 is just so fantastic that the dated aspects of Resident Evil 4 do make me want to swap that a little bit, but I can't lie. I can't lie and say that Resident Evil 4 is not the best because this is easily probably my top 3 games of all time. Next to Metal Gear Solid, and maybe even more than that if I had keeping track of it for whatever fucking reason. But Resident Evil 4 is probably the game that I have beaten the most times in my entire life. It's that or Metal Gear Solid. I've played through it so many times, like 20, 25 at least. I've rebought this game every single time they've had a port for it. I bought it for GameCube, became a fanatic, bought it on PS2 when they said they were gonna add some shit to it, bought it on PS3 when they ported it over, bought it on PS4. The only one I haven't bought it for is the Switch because everybody said that one's not really all that great. I even had it on the Wii. The Wii version was awesome with the pointer controls. Fuck yeah. Resident Evil 4 is awesome. Now obviously there's people that have their gripes with it because it's more action centric, but it still holds on to that horror. I love the story in this one. I love how lengthy the game is. It might only be one campaign, but it's a beefy ass campaign. I actually handle the controls very well. Even replaying it, I handle the controls just fine. So I get the complaints, but I don't get the complaints at the same time. The iconic villains and the different monsters you get in this, the Ganados and like the quantity that you get just to kind of mow down through all of them. I could talk for hours about how awesome this game is. And I did a whole video, if you haven't seen it, on 10 ways that they can improve Resident Evil 4 for a remake if they decide to do one. There's rumors going on now. And I think if they remake this one and they actually do it well, it could be one of the greatest video games of all time, honestly, because this one already is. Resident Evil 4, number 1. Well, that's it, guys. My updated ranking for the Resident Evil games. Hopefully all you Resident Evil fanatics are satisfied now. Hopefully I didn't anger you having them so low, but I gave you reasons, hopefully, that were understandable on why they were so low on my list. For everybody else, and even for those that I just talked about, let me know down below what your ranking is. Tell me your reasons why so that I'm not just looking at lists all day long. It's a little bit more interesting that way. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. And as always, guys, remember, Opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.